All right, get ready, because today we're diving deep into hyperstition.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's a really wild concept.
It is.
To be honest, I was pretty skeptical at first,
Sure.
but the more I dug into all this source material you sent over, the more I realized this is something we should all wrap our heads around.
Absolutely.
So, like in the most basic terms, hyperstition is this idea that thoughts, especially about the future, can actually will themselves into existence.
Yeah, it really is like a self-fulfilling prophecy, but like on steroids,
Right.
We're not just talking about you believing you'll win a race and then training harder because of that belief.
Right.
This operates on a much larger scale.
Okay.
It kind of weaves itself into our narratives, our cultures, our technological advancements,
Yeah.
even the way we understand the world around us.
It's kind of spooky, actually, when you think about it.
It is a little bit, yeah.
And even the word itself, I mean, hyperstition.
Right.
It's a blend of hyperal
Yeah.
and superstition. And it was coined by this group back in the 90s called the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit.
The CCRU?
Yeah, the CCRU.
Yeah.
They were fascinated by this idea that information technology and culture all feed into each other
Yeah.
and create these feedback loops.
Powerful feedback loops that can actually shape reality.
Yeah. So those feedback loops are where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And when you think about regular self-fulfilling prophecies, they typically stem from these existing beliefs about the present.
Right, like, I'm good at math, so I'll probably do well on this test.
Right. Exactly.
But hyperstition takes a fictional idea, something that doesn't even exist yet,
Right.
and makes it feel so real, so inevitable that eventually becomes our reality.
Okay, I need an example because I think my brain is starting to melt.
Sure.
Yeah.
Think about the term cyberspace.
Okay.
Before William Gibson coined that term in Neuromancer, it was a
Yeah.
completely made-up concept.
Uh,
Now it's basically synonymous with the internet. It's
Yeah.
how we think and talk about the internet. Gibson's fiction didn't just predict the future.
yeah.
It helped create it
Yeah.
by planting this seed in our collective imagination.
It's like those sci-fi movies where they show some futuristic technology and then years later somebody actually invents it.
Right, exactly.
But in this case, it's not just gadgets.
It's not just gadgets.
It's like concepts and
Yes.
ways of understanding the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about fictional ideas becoming so ingrained in our culture
Uh-huh.
that they shape our perceptions, they influence our decisions, and they ultimately become part of our lived experience.
This reminds me of memes and how quickly they spread through the
Right.
culture. Could we say hyperstition is like a meme, but just with much bigger impact?
That's a good connection.
Yeah.
There are some similarities for sure.
Okay.
Both memes and hyperstitions are transmitted through culture,
Right.
but their aims, I think, are fundamentally different.
Yeah.
Memes, for the most part, are replicators of information.
Okay.
They might influence existing conditions or behaviors.
So like when ISIS used memes for recruitment back in 2014, that was about like tapping into pre-existing political tensions and amplifying them.
Exactly. They were manipulating an existing situation.
Okay.
Hyperstition, on the other hand, doesn't just manipulate.
Yeah.
It creates.
Whoa.
It takes a fictional idea and through repetition, belief, and cultural embedding, it transforms it into a perceived truth.
So it's less about reflecting the present and more about manifesting a specific future.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is that certain systems like capitalism seem particularly susceptible to hyperstition.
Now, why would that be?
Well-
I mean, I read somewhere that Nick Land,
Yes.
this philosopher who's written a lot about hyperstition,
Right.
argued that capitalism is actually a hyperstitional system itself.
Interesting.
Is that because capitalism is always looking ahead, always striving for what's next for growth and innovation?
You're hitting on a really crucial point.
Okay.
Capitalism thrives on speculation,
Right.
on investing in ideas that have the potential to generate profit.
Yeah.
And oftentimes those ideas are rooted in narratives about the future, about technological advancements and how they'll transform our lives. It's kind of like this science fiction often acts as a blueprint, and
Right.
capitalism provides the tools and the resources to bring those fictional concepts
Yeah.
into the real world.
So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yeah.
but on like a societal scale.
Yeah.
We're told the future is going to look a certain way.
Yeah.
We invest in technology that aligns with that vision.
Exactly.
And then that vision starts to materialize.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
Yeah.
That movie envisioned these advanced robots back in 1927.
Right.
And now we have things like Asimo
Uh-huh.
and Boston Dynamics robots
Totally.
that seem straight out of that film.
It's wild.
That is wild.
Or consider the 1939 New York World's Fair
Okay.
that showcased this idea of a suburban consumer paradise.
Yeah.
And that vision, really heavily influenced by corporations and their marketing,
Right.
had this massive impact on post-war urban planning and the rise of mass consumerism.
You know, it's interesting. We often talk about like the power of belief to shape individual lives.
Yeah.
But I feel like we rarely consider how belief operates on like a collective level,
Right.
how it shapes entire societies and economies.
And that brings us to a particularly interesting aspect of hyperstition. I think
Huh.
its connection to occultism.
Okay, wait, really? Break that down for me.
Yeah.
I mean, at first glance, occultism and hyperstition seem
Totally different.
worlds apart.
But both hyperstition and occultism, in a sense, are about transforming narratives into reality.
Okay.
Think about sigils in ceremonial magic.
Okay.
Those symbols were believed to summon entities or manifest desires
Right.
through their representation and like the focused belief in them.
Uh-huh.
In a similar way, hyperstitions embed themselves in cultural narratives,
Right.
and through widespread belief and propagation, they potentially influence reality.
So it's about the power of symbols and narratives
Exactly.
to shape our understanding of the world
Yeah.
and maybe even to influence the course of events.
Totally. And a great example of that is H.P. Lovecraft's Necronomicon.
Okay.
It's a fictional book,
Right.
a creation of Lovecraft's imagination.
Right.
But it's taken on this life of its own. It's
Yeah.
become this source of fascination and even reverence
Right.
within certain occult circles and influenced popular culture as well.
Wow.
It's blurred the lines between fiction and reality.
It's kind of unsettling to think about how a fictional idea can take root in our collective consciousness.
Yeah.
It becomes so powerful.
Right.
And it makes me wonder, are we entering a whole new era of hyperstition with the rise of AI?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Because, I mean, AI can create content
Yeah.
faster than we can even process it.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question and one we need to think about. I mean, AI has the potential to accelerate the spread of hyperstitional narratives in ways we've never even seen before.
Right.
Imagine entire movements or subcultures springing up around AI-generated narratives
Wow.
that blur the lines between reality and fiction.
It's a bit like that saying, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed yet.
Yeah.
Except in this case, it's the fictional future that's being distributed and potentially shaping the real one.
Right, and that brings up an important question about the relationship
Okay.
between hyperstition memetics and this concept of post-truth.
Right.
We live in an era where information spreads so rapidly,
It does.
and it's becoming harder and harder to figure out what's real
Right.
and what's fabricated.
Yeah. So how do we navigate this landscape?
Yeah.
It feels like we're constantly bombarded with information, much of it designed to just grab our attention and influence our perceptions.
Right.
Do we need to like develop some sort of hyperstition radar?
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do need to cultivate a critical awareness
Okay.
of the narratives that we're consuming. And that means questioning the information we encounter, considering the source, and looking for evidence
Right.
to support or refute the claims that are being made.
But isn't there a risk that we become overly skeptical,
Sure.
too quick to dismiss new ideas or alternative perspectives?
You raise a really valid point.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance
Right.
between healthy skepticism
Uh-huh.
and open-mindedness.
Yeah.
We don't want to fall into that trap of cynicism where
Right.
we just dismiss everything as manipulation or propaganda.
Right.
But we also don't want to be so gullible that
Right.
we just accept everything we're told.
So it's about being discerning, about thinking critically,
Absolutely.
and not just passively absorbing information.
Totally.
It's about recognizing that even seemingly outlandish ideas
Yeah.
can gain traction and shape reality if enough people believe in them.
Precisely. And I think that's where the study of hyperstition can be so valuable.
Okay.
It helps us understand how beliefs, especially those about the future, can have real-world consequences.
So it's not about rejecting all narratives about the future,
No.
but rather about engaging with them critically,
Yeah.
analyzing their potential impact, and making conscious choices
Right.
about which narratives we choose to embrace and which we choose to resist.
Exactly. Hyperstition, like any powerful tool, can be used for good or for ill.
Yeah.
It all depends on our awareness, our understanding,
Right.
and our willingness to engage with it thoughtfully and critically.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is.
It's almost like we've stumbled onto a secret code,
Yeah.
a hidden language that explains how the world really works.
Yeah, it really is like cracking a code.
Yeah.
And once you start to see the world through the lens of hyperstition, you realize how much of our reality is shaped by these shared beliefs and narratives, especially those about the future.
You know, I have to admit, I'm starting to see hyperstitions everywhere now.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, from the hype around certain technologies to like the promises of political campaigns, it feels like we're constantly being sold on a particular vision of the future.
And that's the key, isn't it?
What is?
Recognizing that these visions, these narratives aren't just neutral descriptions of what might happen.
Right.
They're often carefully crafted to elicit specific emotions, to influence our behavior.
Right.
And to ultimately shape the world in a way that benefits whoever's propagating the narrative.
So it's not just about being aware of hyperstitions.
Right.
It's about understanding, like, the motivations behind them.
Yeah, who benefits from us believing a particular story about the future?
Right.
What agendas are being served?
Exactly.
Yeah, and that requires us to be critical consumers of information.
Right.
Question the assumptions embedded in the narratives we're being told. And to consider alternative perspectives.
But where does that leave us?
Well,
if we're constantly questioning everything, can we ever really believe in anything?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
It's not about rejecting all narratives. It's about being more conscious and deliberate about the ones that we choose to embrace.
Right.
Because ultimately, hyperstition is a double-edged sword.
What do you mean by that?
Well, on the one hand, hyperstition can be a really powerful tool for positive change.
Okay.
If enough people believe in a more equitable, sustainable, or just world, that collective belief can actually help bring about that future.
So it's not just about debunking, like, negative or harmful narratives.
Right.
It's also about actively promoting positive ones.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that our beliefs have power.
Yeah.
And they can influence reality.
Right.
But it's also crucial to remember that this power can be misused.
Right.
As we've seen throughout history with propaganda, fear-mongering, and other forms of manipulation.
Yeah, this all makes me think of all the hype around AI.
Sure.
Is it possible that, like, the very narrative of AI's transformative power, its potential for both good and evil, is itself a form of hyperstition?
It's a possibility worth considering. I mean, the way we talk about AI, the hopes and fears that we project onto it.
Right.
These narratives are shaping how we develop, deploy, and interact with this technology.
So how do we make sure, then, that the future of AI and the future in general is shaped by narratives that benefit humanity as a whole rather than just a select few?
That's the million-dollar question, and I don't have all the answers.
Right.
But I think the first step is simply becoming aware of the power of hyperstition, understanding how it operates, and recognizing that we all play a role in shaping the narratives that will ultimately define our future.
I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners. It's not about being afraid of the future or becoming paralyzed by skepticism.
Right.
It's about recognizing that we have agency, that our beliefs matter, and that by engaging with these narratives critically and thoughtfully, we can help steer the future in a more positive direction.
Well said, the future isn't predetermined. It's a story we're all writing together consciously or unconsciously.
Right.
And the more we understand about the power of hyperstition, the better equipped we'll be to write a story that benefits all of humanity.
This has been a really mind-bending deep dive, I have to say.
It has.
And for all of our listeners out there, we encourage you to start paying attention to the narratives that you encounter.
Yeah.
The stories that you're being told about the future. Question those stories, analyze them, and consider their potential consequences.
Absolutely.
Because the more we understand about the power of belief to shape reality, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the complexities of our rapidly changing world.